cage only I built, all my efforts to be set free drifted farther out to sea. These struggles in my own heart, these struggles tearing me apart. Where's the answer I might find? What gives me peace of mind? I can rest in luxurious love. His forgiveness is more than enough. He leads me where I need to go. His path He will show. Waves are crashing into the shore, storm is raging right outside the door. It's so easy to be afraid, 'cause of God's great love I'm saved today. Rest in luxurious love. His forgiveness more than enough. He leads me where I need to go. His path He will show. Rest in luxurious love. His forgiveness more than enough. He leads me where I need to go. His path He will show. He will show.
Good morning. Welcome to the Bridge Church this morning. Happy Sunday morning. Beautiful. How many of you have ever heard the phrase in your Christian journey, I have a personal relationship with Jesus? Or that you were taught when you're younger that maybe when someone who doesn't know Jesus yet, you're supposed to go up and say, hey, would you like to have a personal relationship with Jesus? Or I have a personal relationship with Jesus. Maybe you would want to have one like I have one. And then when I hear that, I always start to wonder, I go, what do I mean by a personal relationship with Jesus? Because for me in my Christian walk and in my Christian experience, oftentimes it seems very far from personal. It seems very different from what I think it should be or what I would want a personal relationship with God to be like. The word soul has a lot of interest in it these days. You've got bookstores that are full of books that have the title soul in it. You've got songs that are being filled with the theme of being about the soul. And it could be in not just Christian music, but in contemporary music and rock music and alternate on the radio. And I'll hear a song that is talking about my soul or their soul. And what we're not talking about is Chicken Soup for the Soul, which has over 250 titles right now with topics ranging anywhere from parenting, pets, faith, food, and even body confidence. And I would actually just love to take all of those books and take them off the shelf because it has absolutely nothing to do with the word soul and what God talks about when the Bible talks about the word soul. Though they're great books, they're fantastic, they're great, they make you feel good, they're feel-good things, but they don't get me in touch with my soul the way that God talks about our soul. And some of these book titles, I even have them in my library. I've got a bunch. So I came up with just a quick short list of books that have soul in their title that I've come across, and I've even got a few right here. Mirror of the Soul, The Untethered Soul, Soul Care, Destiny of the Soul, The Wounded Soul, Soul Friend, Soul Keeping, The Mind of a Soul, Soul Survivor, and When the Soul Listens. And the list, I mean, we could go on and on and on. And you have probably never seen so many books or titles in the last 20 to 25 years. It's just exploded because before that, you never would have seen such an interest or seen them on titles. But suddenly, the word soul has just kind of popped up in our culture, and everyone is using soul. And they can do that because the word soul is kind of a fuzzy word. And when people talk about the soul, it's a kind of a fuzzy discussion because I don't really know exactly what it is that we're talking about. I mean, I can have an idea, but I don't know if you and I are talking about the exact same thing. So, today we're going to kind of dig into the Bible a little bit, into the Hebrew language, and understand the word soul, especially from out of the Old Testament, because that's where we're introduced to the language and the whole concept of what a soul is, and it's seen for the first time. So we're going to talk about the word soul, and we're going to try and take some of the fuzziness off of it. And what we want to do, and here's the goal, we want to kind of move it right back into a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. So first of all, the word soul means the center of our desires. And we cry out to God, God, stir our desire, stir my desire, because that's exactly what it is that God wants to do. He wants to stir our desire. And God has stirred desires within us. And the question is, what do we do with these desires that are being stirred up, that are growing and starting to come out of our soul? Well, the Hebrew word for soul is nephesh. And I didn't take Greek or Hebrew when I was at seminary. So if you think I don't know Greek or Hebrew, you're right. I don't. But you do need to know I have an undergraduate degree in the German language, which has absolutely nothing to do with this. But I have done some study in the Word, and I have gone to other scholars who do know how to translate the word out of the Hebrew. So the word nephesh has two primary meanings in the Bible. And the first it means being or life. And it's a part of us that lives forever. And Genesis, it says that God made man a living soul, and he breathed his breath of life into him and made him a living soul. So the soul refers to that part of us that has the eternal destiny. That's what we're talking about when we're trying to save people's souls. And all throughout the Bible, there are passages that refer to kind of this eternity of our being now that God has breathed His life inside of us. The second meaning for the word of soul is where it gets interesting, because that means to crave and have desires and to have longings. And it's very interesting to go into the Hebrew text in the Old Testament and look up the word for soul as it's connected to cravings and longings and desires, because it's the source of our desire. And when God says to stir up our desires, He stirs our desires and He wants us to recognize and then do something about it. The psalmist says in regards to the cravings and longings of the soul, he says, "My soul pants for you. My soul, it thirsts for you." I go, is there desire there? Yeah. Is there craving? Is there longing there? Isaiah says, "My soul yearns for you in the night." My soul has this consuming desire, God. You put it in me, and it's just coming out all of the time. This is the focus of the word soul today that I really want to pay attention to, which is desire and longing and craving and just seeking purpose and seeking meaning in our lives, which is something that is showing up in our culture. It's craving, and it's what we're hungering for. And it's why it's in the music. It's why it's in the books that we see. It's why it's in the media more and more and more, because all of the books that we see and the music that's coming out, they're not referring to this eternal destiny of this soul, that what happens when I die. It's about all of these desires and this quest and this hunger for meaning, something that is going to satisfy this empty spot and this empty hole, this empty place in my life that hasn't been filled before, to satisfy the desires that I have inside of me. This is the difference between the human world and the animal world, because it's this kind of spiritual consciousness. Because no other animal would be able to come up to you and say, you know what, I have cravings and I've got desires for meaning and purpose and truth and joy and destiny. I'm just not, is this really what I was created for? No other animal would ever come up to us and say that. Why are we different from every other creature on this planet? Because we have a soul, and we've been wired up for that desire from day one when we were born. Gerald May, in the book The Awakened Heart, he says this. He says, there is a desire within each of us in the deep center of ourselves that we call our heart. We were born with it. It is never completely satisfied, and it never dies. Our true identity, our reason for being, is to be found in this desire. Soul, longing, craving, searching. He continues, when the desire is too much to bear, we often bury it beneath frenzied thoughts and activities, or escape it by dulling our immediate consciousness of living. It is possible to run away from the desire for years, even decades at a time, but we cannot eradicate it entirely. It keeps touching us in little glimpses and hints in our dreams, our hopes, our unguarded moments. So how do we fill the soul? Because the soul has this desire to pull something into it to satisfy it. So how do we fill that? Sometimes we can fill it with just stuff. We're very good at that. It could be TV, it could be movies, music, sports, cars. It could be clothes, computers, houses, education, marriage, hobbies, hunting, career. It could be travel, parties, drugs, alcohol. And we can make a list that just goes on and on and on and on and on. And you could fill a book of ideas if you travel the whole world over to find ways that maybe I could try to fill this hole in my soul. And if you turn on the TV on most nights, there's two primary ways that we love to try and push off onto people, which would be food and sex. I mean, you just turn on the commercials and you start to notice all of this food and sex, and they're trying to sell whatever product it is they want to sell using those methods, and used in a way to make us think that, maybe Maybe they can satisfy my soul. Maybe I should try it yet again. And food comes on all the time. And the way that our culture promotes it just amazes me, that we need to eat more. And usually it's this really fatty food that if we just do that, it's going to make me happy and it's going to give me great relationships and it's going to satisfy this hunger inside of me. Doctors Richard and his wife Rachel Heller are authors of 7 books, and they're all on this carbohydrate addiction, and they explain that for many people, eating certain foods, it really is like doing a drug. It is like what drugs does for drug addicts, where I have to eat more. And what I try to do is I try to stop eating, and I'm trying to stop it. But every time I see these things that I shouldn't be doing, I keep telling myself, you know what, I'm not going to do this. I shouldn't eat this, but then I do it, and it makes me feel good. Then there is sex, and the way that we use sex to fill the hole in our lives is stunning these days. I have a good friend who I would bet will pretty much crawl into bed with a person they have been following in an illicit sexual relationship over the last 6 months. And every time they do that, they're trying to fill this hole that they have inside of them. And it will fail. And I have to ask, why do you keep doing this? These are just 2 directions. There are so many different directions we could go in this. And we burn out and use our coping tools, our fixes, having tried to use them all of our lives. And some of us, we're there right now. And some of us, we may not be there right now, and we will get there. And some of us, we came into a walk with Jesus Christ because we couldn't find a way to fill our soul. And we were so hungry. And we came to Jesus, and Jesus met us. And we have a relationship with us. And some of us, we're in a relationship with Jesus, but we still have this deep hole in our soul. And some of us, we have come to Jesus, and we're still trying to fill that hole with all these other things, anything other than Jesus. But if we walk out the door into our culture today, here's what's happening. We either go one direction or another. We have become pilgrims or believe that the hole in our soul relates to a place that's called home. Craig Barnes, he talks about this in his book called Searching for Home. Fantastic book, where there's a place that we can journey to where the hole in our soul can be filled, and that is what we call home. It's God, it's Jesus Christ. And it is life after this life, and we become pilgrims. And there's so many people that have been trying to fill this hole in their soul for so long without finding answers. We start to move into this kind of culture that becomes nomadic. And the difference between a nomad and a pilgrim is that a nomad doesn't ever expect to find home. They keep traveling, they keep experiencing things, and they never expect actually to land anywhere that will give them a permanent destination. And we're growing into a culture where most people around us are becoming nomadic, and they say, you know what, there is no home. Well, that's arrogant of you to think that there is a home, that you have an answer, and that you have found home, and that you're telling others that there's a home and that they need to find it. You don't need to be telling people that there's a home. I mean, how do you know where home is? And more people are slipping away from the fact that there might be a home to believing there is no home. Well, maybe there's just millions of ways home. I mean, how can you be sure your way is really home? Everyone thinks they have their own home, and everyone's home is the right home. So scrap the whole idea of becoming and just become this nomad. And they start to live for experiences instead of the final destination. And they make their way through life lost in this nomadic experience. And they make their way through life with this nomadic existence. And that's our world today, trying to fill the hole of our soul today, but it never satisfies. The second aspect of the word soul from the Hebrew language, when we look at it as it relates to desire and how it connects how we connect our desires to emotions. Some of you might be telling you, well, I'm not really emotional. Well, the Hebrew people, they were so into emotions that you can't read a book or story in the Old Testament and not see that is just jam-packed with emotions all over it. The way they would walk with God, the way they talked to God and prayed, and the way that God would talk and relate to them. It was all about feelings, but not just feelings, but it was how God connected to their soul was through their feelings throughout the entire Old Testament. the biblical description of the soul, the condition of the soul as we go through the Old Testament can be seen, first of all, when the emotions are going down. Like feelings like anguish and pain. And we start to hear phrases like, my soul is anguished, my soul is grieved, my soul is in distress, my soul is bitter, my soul is distressed and weary, and my soul is troubled and it's empty. And we start to get this, see all of these emotions as we're going kind of down, as we would say them. But to every one of them, all of these emotions, the soul is still, these feelings are being connected to God. And then we shift to the upside emotions, where we would say they're starting to go up, where my soul feels connected and restored. He restores my soul. My soul is joyful. My soul is delivered. My soul is satisfied. My soul is delighted. My soul is resting. My soul is replenished. And so you have this upside and you have this downside, and everything along the way is there, where you have these emotions that are connecting to the soul in the life of an individual. Can you see where I'm starting to go with this? What does it mean to have a personal relationship with God? And how many of you are in a personal relationship with someone that has absolutely no emotion connected to it? And you'd tell me, well, that's crazy. And you would be right. It would be crazy, because all of our relationships, if they're intimate and personal and meaningful relationships, whether that's a dating relationship or a marriage relationship, or guys just love hanging out with guys, women just wanting to spend time connecting with other women, if there's not some kind of emotion that's connected in those relationships, well, then it would not really be happening. It's all over at that point. So what I have here is I have a list of feeling words. You can't describe the condition of a soul in the Old Testament without a feeling word. So what I want you to do is I have a list of words, and I want you to look through the list to see if there's a word that you connect to. I want you to find a word that describes your soul today. And try to register your emotions, the emotions of your life, of your soul right now. And this is not an exhaustive list, where you would say, my soul is what? My soul is... Do you have it? Because you might look at this list and say, I don't feel any of these things. And there are some of us in the culture today who are not in touch with our emotional side. And you'd say, you know what, I just don't have emotions like that. I never feel up or down or one way or the other in a direction. I'm really just kind of a steady, directed person. And that could be. Or it could be that you've repressed your feelings and denied your feelings. And you know what happens when you deny your feelings long enough, especially if you are denying your feelings where they're going on the downside. And if guys do this long enough, what they do is they wind up in a counselor's office. And then they start to try and process this. If they've turned all their feelings on themselves, then they feel shame and depression. But if they take these down feelings and start firing them off at other people, then we start getting things like anger and rage and violence if it's been repressed long enough and bottled up long enough, and it finally works its way to its final conclusion, and that would be bad. And as a guy, if you wind up in a counselor's office, you may wind up there and the counselor would say something to you like, you're not in touch with your emotions. The Old Testament Hebrew people were so in touch with their emotions. That's why they were healthy, and that's why they were connected in kind of this personal relationship wrestling with God. So are your emotions not the window to your soul? Because emotions are about our soul, and the emotions are one of the places that God invites us into to have a healthy relationship with Him. And historically, the church has denied emotions in this kind of healthy connecting point with God. Whether it's an up experience or a down experience, We do experience them, but we don't always relate and connect them to our relationship with God the way the Hebrew people did. David is the perfect example of this as the person who connects the highs and the lows with his relationship with God, where David says, "Why are you downcast, O my soul? Put your hope in God, for I will praise him." And he starts to take these down emotions, these depressing feelings, and he starts to hook them into a relationship with God. And then he says to God, he says, "My soul is anguished, God. How long, O Lord? How long am I going to feel this way?" And he starts to take these down emotions, and he says, "These emotions are the place, God, where you're going to meet with me. And I'm going to bring them into my relationship with you. And I encounter you here because, God, you care about my emotions." And then David praises God when he moves to kind of the upside of his emotions. He says, "God, you restore my soul, and I lift up my soul, and you I trust, and my soul praises you." And then David takes all of this and acknowledges that these are God-given experiences and emotions, and he takes them and he connects them into his relationship with God. I have a mentor in my life, and she's a spiritual director. That's kind of her title. And this understanding of a spiritual director is starting to come back into our culture. It's been historically in the church, it's been lost, other than the Catholic Church has always been very strong in this, but it's starting to be reintroduced back into the Protestant church tradition. A spiritual director is basically a soul friend. Someone who sits and listens with you and they kind of give feedback to the things that you're sharing with them about your life, and you're exploring your journey with God. And they just ask a lot of good questions, and they start mirroring things back to you, saying, "You know what, this is what I see going on. How does that sit with you? What do you think about that?" As I'm kind of giving you an outside perspective, helping them hear what it is that God is saying. Trying to help people how God is wanting to share and connect in our lives. So I talk to my spiritual director about my emotions regularly. I meet with her about once a month, and sometimes I get so emotional when I'm talking with her that I get really frustrated because my emotions, they can go all over the place, back and forth. I'm like an emotional roller coaster where I've got these highs where I'm up just going, yeah, and then I'm just come crashing down. God, I'm failing and I'm just blowing this, and I just kind of have these emotional experiences. My wife, Emma, she doesn't fly quite as high or low as I do, which really kind of helps regulate me, because I don't know what would happen in our marriage if I was married to someone who's having just as much high and low as me. We would have crashed our marriage relationship years ago. But my spiritual director keeps pulling me in to kind of saying, give your emotions to God. How do we do that? And I just keep saying, I just want to stop wandering in my emotions alone. Because when I have these emotions, I feel like God is absent when I'm down. When I have down emotions, God, you're just not there. Does anyone else experience that? When I have down emotions, God, where are you? I don't feel you, God. And you come to a church service and you go, I just don't feel anything spiritual. I just don't feel anything. And it's been so long since I felt anything. And then we take our up emotions when we're just flying high. I feel like God's present in my life, and it feels so good to be close to God. Finally, again, I don't know what was the distance, but I'm feeling close and intimate with Him. And then I go, do I really believe that I'm closer to God when my emotions are high than when my emotions are low? Because how can we live this way? When our emotions are up, we don't register them as thankfully engaging in a place with God. We just feel better about life, so now we feel closer to Him. But we hardly talk to Him on the up emotions like David did. Oh God, I rejoice in you because my soul is so satisfied. And he takes it to even to the point of worship. And he does with the down emotions, and he takes these down emotions and turns them into worship, and he goes back and forth. And the result is that many people, what they try to start doing is go, how do I take these down emotions and manipulate them and bring them back up high so I can feel close to God again? Because I don't like it, because when I'm down, I don't feel close to God. So I want to bring these emotions up where I can finally feel close to God again. Have you ever done that? Because nothing can be further from the truth here. God does not exit or enter our lives based on our emotional state. Our emotions are connected to God. God is always connected to us through our emotions, but He doesn't enter or exit depending on our emotions. He wants to be connected to all of our emotions because God is always present. He wants to engage in them in personal relationship with us through them. I've been married 19 years, and I take my high emotions and I take my low emotions and I share them with her. And I'm so thankful for the personal relationship that I have with my wife. And she would never tell me, well, I'm not really available or around when you have these down emotions. But when you kind of get back and solve things and you kind of get back up to where I need you and the emotional high, well, now I'm available to you again. She would never say any of that. I bring all of my emotions. I bring the highs, the lows, and everything in between to her, and our relationship grows based on those shared emotions. And I ask her, Emma, I want you to pour out all of your emotions on me so that I can be better in touch with your soul. Because I want to be there and see and be a part of the process of how she is moving and growing. Learning for us to do this together in a relationship makes our marriage and our relationship get deeper and deeper as we each learn to engage in our emotional state together. So we come into our relationship with God, and God says, I want to do that too. I want to be in your life on the downside. And I want to be on the upside of your life. I want both. Many times when I wake up in the morning, I don't get out of bed very fast. I'm not fast to climb out of bed. I just kind of lay in bed and I feel like an agnostic. And it takes me about an hour or two before I start to believe that God exists again at some kind of emotional level. Typically, it doesn't kick in until I've had a cup or two of coffee. And I just kind of keep telling myself, why can't you just wake up and sense the presence of God, Kenny? I mean, why can't you wake up and just feel His presence? Because when I wake up, I feel very distant and away from God and away from Him for an easy hour, sometimes up to 3 hours. I just feel like God and I were just not connecting. And I feel closer to God after coffee, and I start to wonder, maybe you're wondering, why did you even hire such a weird pastor as me? But that's just how I am. But the last year I've been noticing the feelings like, God, you have felt absent. And I have these down emotions in my life. So I've been coming to God just saying, God, what is it about that's going on in my life that you want to change? What is it that you're wanting to see happen? What is it you're wanting to do around these feelings where I'm feeling like you're absent, but that doesn't mean it's true, but what are you wanting to do? And so I've been trying to process it for a while and figure this out, because I want to rationalize it, understand it. I want to fix it. And my spiritual director says, do you notice how often you're trying to fix and figure things out about God? A couple years ago, a lady who used to come to our church, she used to say that whenever she would see eagles flying, that she thought it was the blessing or the presence of God. And I was like, okay, that's cool. I mean, I don't know. I mean, yes, God is present, and I'm glad that you have a reminder. And so, but what I've done is every time now I see eagles, I think of that and I'm like, yes, God, you are present. I kind of recognize the presence of God. And I go, that's cool. Not because the eagle's now the presence of God around me, but it's a reminder of His presence. And I've been more consciously aware and acknowledging the presence of God when I see an eagle. It's been kind of cool. So when we moved to our house recently, I remember thinking, wouldn't it be cool if we had some eagles around here that were flying? So I went to grab my morning coffee, and I'm feeling, God, why are you so absent? And I'm wrestling with this question. I grab my coffee. I look out at the back window. I'm just kind of looking out at the hills and the trees. And then I see this immense eagle up in this tree. And I grab those binoculars that we've got by the back door, and I grab them, and I'm just looking at them. And it looks like this bird is just staring right at me. And I think he was. And I just go, is there anything going on with this metaphor between God and this eagle? Because it's like you're looking right at me saying, I'm always around. Even though you can't always see me, I'm always present, but I'm not always evident. And I can hide or I can come out, but I'm always right there. And the eagle could have been there, 100 times. Could have been there every single day. And just sitting in the tree, and I never seen it before. But that morning, as I'm wrestling with God, it felt like I heard God talk to me. And then one day I noticed that the eagle had built a nest in a tree near our house. I'm like, okay, God, what's going on here? It's like God started to say to me, and I started to hear this in my heart, saying, you struggle so much, Kenny, with your feelings. You think down feelings mean I'm absent. And nothing could be further from the truth, because I'm always present and I can show up anytime I want. And I want you to start leaning into those down emotions in relationship with me and start trusting me and move into faith in this area. And most people don't like having these down emotions, but when we start to try and stir them up so that we can feel closer to God, that's where we start to go on a dangerous detour. Because when we come into a worship scenario, like in a church, what we're not there to do is stir up our emotions so that we can feel closer to God. That is not the purpose or the goal. That would be idolatry. Idolatry says, I like something more than I like God, and I like these emotions, so what I do is I come to stir up my emotions so that I can feel closer to God. What we're really doing is we're getting hooked on our emotions. And isn't that possibly one of the dangers of the contemporary worship culture that is exploding in the last 30 years? Music should be up, it should be down. It would be good for us even to have music in our lives that help us to lament and to grieve. David in the Bible would sing songs about seeking God and searching for Him in the darkness, and then bringing all of these down, hard emotions before God. I had a friend who was deeply grieving over the loss of his parents, and he said he hates, well, maybe not hates, he says he really struggles going to church because all of these emotional songs that we're always trying to lead him to these positive emotions, he says all we do is sing these upbeat songs, when the reality says I want to sing and I want to process and I want to get out some of these deep hurting emotions that I'm feeling. He says we're always trying to get up high and then to pull others up with us, but we never get to sit in these down emotions in our spiritual journey without someone trying to fix them or stop us and refocus them on what is positive, how God is going to save us. He says, sometimes I just need to sit in the pain and grieve. And there's a danger of making our up emotions the measurement for our relationship with God. There's a book called The Dark Night of the Soul, written hundreds of years ago by St. John of the Cross. And he says, God leads us in the dark night of into the dark night to purify us from all these imperfections so that He can bring us further along. And He detaches us from feelings to get us to move into a real relationship of seeking Him and Him alone. And when you've been on the downside for a long time, like St. John of the Cross had been, he finally just said, I don't care if you show up emotionally or not, God. I'm going to follow you anyway. I want to seek you with all my heart. I'm never stopping. I'm never stopping. And God says, that's what I'm looking for. That passion, that heart, that you pursue me on the upside and you pursue me on the downside, and it doesn't matter. My feelings aren't an indicator of whether I'm following you or not, God. Or of who you are or who you are not, or how I have to manipulate my life to get these things going again. He just dives in and He gets things going and says, this is just going to be the pattern of my life. The word nephesh, the Old Testament word for soul, it is the source of our desire, and our desire connects us to the center of our emotions, and the soul is the place of desire and longing and craving, and these desires are closely connected to our emotions. So what are some of the common emotions that we're feeling now? Maybe as a culture or as your family or just you. And what would it mean to connect these emotions to God? To make these emotions a personal place of communion and connection to God? What would it mean to let God meet you and connect with you at that place of your emotional being? And the deal today is that the journey of understanding what that a relationship with God is a personal relationship with God, and a personal relationship with God is going to engage all of our emotions. Our mind, our will, our strength, but also our heart. And I don't think we're very good at engaging our heart with God anymore. We don't always know what that even means. In the Old Testament, the heart is the soul. And the soul, it's connected to the emotion, and the emotions are to be connected to God in a personal walk with Him. And that's where I think God is wanting to continue to lead me and to lead us. I just want to close in prayer and just kind of bless us forward through this as we process it. God, we sing a lot about passion these days. And God, I am passionate about you. If you're passionate for God, if you really are, you know what you need to be passionately doing, passionately engaging all of the emotions and experiences of your life in a relationship with Him. And you'll do that by faith. And as you walk that pathway, invite Him in by faith on a regular basis. And you'll sit with Him in your emotion and simply say, Lord, my soul is downcast. Or like Jesus in the garden said, Lord, my soul is exceedingly sorrowful. Or on the upside, to take that and bring a good day into His presence and say, God, today was a great day. Today was an incredible day. And to just plug in the emotion and ponder with Him the fulfillment and the joy and the fun, and to not walk through your life without engaging and connecting to God through all of our experiences. Invite God to remind you and teach you how to allow your emotions to enter into your relationship into a much deeper level. Amen. I do want to challenge you to take some time today. Get alone with God for 10, 15 minutes if it's possible. But what I want you to do, the challenge is register your emotions with God. And then quietly, just kind of, what I'd always do, and it's just this physical thing, I kind of take these emotions and I just grab one or two. And I sometimes I just hold my hands open like this. I feel like I've got these little, something in my hand, the emotion. Let's get a little ball or fuzzy or prickly and warm, fuzzy, cold, prickly. And I just take them. I'm just like, God, these are my emotions today. Sometimes this is pain and this is hurt, or this is joy and this is excitement and thrill, or fear or worry and concern, and I just kind of hold them, and I just hold them out before God, and I just say, God, this is what I have. This is kind of where I am. And I challenge you to do something like that, where you get quiet, just hold your feelings before God and believe that whether they are up or whether they are down, that He is walking with you and He's wanting to hold them with you, and to be so thankful that you shared them with Him, where you bring them to God until you register your emotions with Him, because He is so thankful that you have them, He gave them to you, and He wants to hold them with you. Have a fantastic day, and I'll see you guys next week. Thanks.